Good evening, Chair and members. You are now broadcasting live on YouTube.
Suppose I'd better do a microphone then, hadn't I, if I'm going to speak. Thank you very much, everyone. Right, so good evening, and I'd like to welcome members and officers to the Cabinet meeting, and also welcome those who are watching us live on YouTube and at a later date via the recording, and also in person for the first time in, gosh, must be 18 months or so. So thank you very much. Please note that this meeting is being streamed live on the Council's YouTube channel. And councillors, please be aware that later in the meeting, we'll be going into part 2, which involves moving the officers and this chamber into a breakout room. Obviously, the officers are going to be moved into a virtual room and we'll be staying where we are in the chamber, but you know what we mean. And we'll be displaying a holding message on the YouTube channel. So it might take us a few seconds while we sort the admin to do with that. Please ensure that we've been advised that we're in the part 2 part of the meeting, members and officers, before we start discussing the item. Now, before the meeting starts, I'd like to ask our committee member and scrutiny officer to explain how proceedings this evening are going to work. Matthew.
Thank you, Chair, and very good evening to you. I'm just going to undertake a roll call of officers who are joining remotely. Ian Cooper.
I'm here.
Thank you. Steve Crowley.
Present.
Thank you. Chloe Gray.
Present.
Thank you. Ian Fullstone.
Good evening. Present.
Thank you. Nigel Smith.
Present.
Thank you. Vaughan Watson.
Present.
And Andrew Mills.
Hello, I'm present.
Thank you. Have I missed any officers? No, thank you very much. Just to ensure everyone knows, I have Councillor David Levitt present as the Chair of Overview and Scrutiny. When requested to vote, vote via the yes, no and abstain buttons on your microphone unit. Details of how members voted will be shown on the screens around the room, and the result will be visible on the YouTube stream. In the event of a tied vote, the Chair will have the cast-in vote. Members and officers are required to wear masks when standing or moving around the room or the building, and masks can be removed while seated. Exit and entry to the room and the building will be guided by marshals. Are there any questions before we start the meeting? No, over to you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so apologies for absence. I've got some apologies from deputy executive members who, although we like them to try and attend these meetings, I don't feel that we necessarily need to record their attendance formally, given that they're here almost voluntarily in support of their executive members. In any event, deputy exec members who've sent apologies are councillors Adam Ruggiero Shakir, Ruth Brown and Carol Stanier. I'm not aware of any others. Paul?
I had Sean Pendergast to that list, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. Okay. And I also have apologies from Councillor Keith Hoskins, who's Chair of Finance, Audit and Risk. Other than Sean's apologies, Paul, did you or anyone else have further apologies for tonight? No. Lovely. In that case, the next item on the agenda are the minutes of the last Cabinet meeting on the 16th of March. I think most of us were present for that meeting. Those of us who were here, are we satisfied that we can take as read that they're a true record of the meeting held on that date?
Madam Chair, I'm happy to move if you're, I'm happy to second if you're moving.
I will move that. I've seen nods from Councillor Albert. No objections. Okay. Do we need to take a formal vote? Yes, please. Okay, in that case, we need to move to the vote. If you could use the buttons on the pads for me, please. There we go. Thank you, Sam. I think that's clearly carried. Okay, so next, notifications of any other business. I have had none for this evening, which then brings me on to my announcements as chair. In accordance with council policy, this meeting is being audio recorded as well as filmed. The audio recording will be available on the NHDC website and the film recording via the NHDC YouTube channel. Members are reminded that this council has declared a climate emergency. This is a serious decision and means that as this is an emergency, all of us, members and officers, have that in mind as we carry out our various roles and tasks for the benefit of our district. More details are included on the agenda front sheet. Members are reminded to make declarations of interest before an item. The detailed reminder about this and speaking rights is set out under Chair's announcements on the agenda. And I'm going to take item 8, which regards the community lottery policies, before item 7. And I'm also going to take item 16 and the part 2 item regarding the grounds maintenance contract before item 14, which is the part 1 report on the same subject. Public participation this evening, we have none, in which case I'm told to move to the lottery policy, which is item 8, before the items referred from other committees, which was overview and scrutiny. I was minded perhaps to take scrutiny's feedback on the community lottery policy first. I think that that makes more sense than what I've got written on this script. Agreed? Agreed. Lovely. In which case, David, if you wouldn't mind, could we please have the scrutiny report and referrals?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members of the Cabinet. We had a fairly robust discussion, I think was the correct term, at overview and scrutiny on this particular subject. Several concerns expressed around, particularly around the council encouraging gambling. The point was made that this tonight is actually looking at Gatherwell's policies, not the decision to support the lottery, because that was already taken back in December by Cabinet. So we did concentrate specifically on the policies. The recommendations that came out of the meeting were that the age limit for playing a North Hertfordshire Community Lottery should be raised from 16 to 18 should legislation allow this. This was again felt to be trying to discourage school age and younger people from gambling. As the National Lottery's already changed to 18 as well, or will do from October. Also, that consideration be given to putting a policy in place which would limit any one person to buying no more than £10 worth of tickets per week, and that the concerns and issues by the Overview and Scrutiny Committee as detailed in minutes be taken into account when making a final decision. So I say the main concerns were around encouraging gambling, specifically things like, although it says payment would be by debit card or direct debit, it was felt it might be worth strengthening it by putting in a clause that credit cards will not be accepted. And I think that was probably the main concerns that came out of the meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, David. Before we move on, does anybody have any sort of specific questions, queries or comments just on what David said, holding any substantive for later in the evening? No? Okay. Was that the only item you had to refer for us, David?
It was, Chair.
It was. Excellent. In that case, thank you very much. I think you've got off quite lightly. You're welcome to stay or go as you please. Excellent. Lovely. In which case, that will bring us on nicely then to item number 8, which is the North Hertfordshire Community Lottery new policies. Sam, are you going to present with Steve?
Yeah, I can introduce this, Chair. Thank you. This is to do with the policy specifically relating to the community lottery that was actually already passed by Cabinet last year. So we're not looking at the concept specifically of a community lottery. We're looking at these very specific policies laid out. Now, obviously, I played a part in the overview and scrutiny meeting, and those concerns were heard. And I think it's very important to point out that the reason we're doing this is because of central government shortfalls in funding to local authorities. So local authorities are having to look outside the box in ways to fund projects that we want to do for good causes. And that's very much what this project is all about. But we're here to discuss not the overall concept, as I say, that the policies and some of the concerns, well, all of the concerns from overview and scrutiny were very much listened to by the officers. And I know Steve Crowley has done quite a bit of work on this. So I'm going to pass to him to detail all of those, that work's done. I've already discussed it with him, so he can answer in much more detail than I can. Steve.
Thank you, Sam. So, as just explained, this isn't to focus on what was presented at the Cabinet meeting. It is to focus on the policies that have obviously been set out within the report. But what I wanted to do to start off with, just provide a little bit of an overview regarding this specific topic. So the policies are there to protect the people that are playing lottery. They, as Sam has said, it is there as a lottery to enable good causes as a way to generate additional money than maybe some of the other ways they may do. It is not a commercial project, it is a community project. And although there will be many which will come to the council, and again, they explain within the Cabinet report, the primary purpose is to enable local organisations to generate money for their good causes. We know there are concerns regarding this as in terms of it could be seen as gambling. However, I strongly disagree with this. And the reason for that is it is similar to what other charities do and also other types of organisations to enable people to take part, but more importantly, for them to decide where their good causes go. I think this is why this lottery is a lot different to most lotteries. Most national lotteries, when you play, you do not know where the money is going to. With this type of lottery, because it is a community lottery, 50% of the tickets money that you spend on those tickets goes directly to the good cause that you wish to select. We know that over 80 other councils in the UK have signed up to these policies, and we've been in correspondence with a number of them, and also we've been trying to find out as much as we can about how they feel with the way that Gatherwells run the lottery and how they are, whether they are happy or not satisfied with the approach and the policies which are in place. And every council we spoke to so far has been very positive with regards to that. Gatherwells has been in operations for 8 years, operating these type of lotteries, and there has not been a single incident regarding gambling or any issues related to vulnerable people. We also know that Gatherwells are audited annually by the Gambling Commission. Therefore, this ensures that their policies are up to date and being implemented correctly. I have provided, and members should have it in front of them, an addendum which covers the key points which were raised at overview and scrutiny. So just to give a brief overview of them, in the first recommendation regarding the age limit, we have spoken to Gatherwells. They have explained that this is not possible as they run the lottery at the current minimum age, which is 16. However, we do know that other lotteries have already and are also in the process of raising the age limit to 18. And we also know that at the moment there is a review looking at the gambling legislation, and even Gatherwell said that it's highly likely that that will be considered, and therefore there is a chance, I can't say for definite, there is a chance for that during that review for the age limit to naturally raise to 18. With regards to spending limits, again, we've spoken to other councils and also to Gatherwells, and we've been informed that we can, if we wish to put in place to have a minimum amount. However, no other council has requested that. And it does show the policies, sorry, just very quickly, under 3.1 of the report, it does show the different systems that they have in place. For example, and I tried it out myself, when you go on to a lottery page, the maximum tickets you can purchase on one transaction is 20 tickets. You cannot buy more than those. That is the maximum which is set out there. They do also, which is set out within the gambling and also social responsibility policies, have a number of procedures that they do try to control the amount of tickets which are sold. They did inform us that most people which are buying on larger quantities are because they're doing it as syndicates. but they have said that if we really wanted to, we could have a cap. However, they recommended that this is not required. I know that there's also reference to the credit cards. It is a debit card only system in terms of how you can pay. So again, Gabba Wells have given us that assurance that that is the only way that you can purchase tickets. The only other thing to point out, which is in the main Cabinet report, is under 8.4, where it explains about the date that we'd be looking to apply for the license if the policies are approved. It says it's the 30th of June. However, because we need to wait for 5 working days to clear from any approval from Cabinet, therefore that date would go back to the 7th of July. I think that provides, like I say, a bit of an overview of some of the issues that have been raised and the concerns that we've got. But if there are obviously any questions, I'm more than happy to help them, answer them.
Right, thank you very much, Steve, for that updated and comprehensive report. Can I take any questions, comments, etc., discussion from colleagues on this? Judy.
Because I'm so quiet. Yes, okay. I'm feeling quite diffident about this, which I know is not my normal way of operating, and maybe it's because I haven't been in council chambers for so long. My feeling is that the officers have done a magnificent job researching, putting together, finding out what other people are doing, adjusting plans, coming up with ideas. And maybe, and I'll turn this on myself, maybe some of us over the last months, maybe over the last year, have spent so much of our councillor life and time worrying about people being fed and housed and educated and well and looked after, that some of us haven't maybe spent as much time as we might have done focusing on this sort of issue. And the reason I raise that, and the reason I'm having this diffident moment, is that having read the comments from the scrutiny committee, having had 1 or 2 councillors also speak to me, and realising that the concerns that are being raised are not political ones on which to die in a ditch. They are absolutely cross-party. And I think I know the difference between matters of principle over which I would die in a ditch and matters which are full of cross-party concern. This is the biggest preamble I've ever made to anything. I'm just wondering whether we should take a few more weeks maybe, or a few more days, or just give ourselves a little bit of space for some slightly further cross-party discussion to establish what we actually do feel about this and whether we're happy to proceed. As I say, it's my bad and it's the councillor's bad. It's no reflection at all on the magnificent work that Steve Crowley and his team have done. But I'm just feeling a little bit uneasy. When I hear comments about not encouraging gambling, I think, oh, really? And think it's slightly kind of overstated, but I do also think it's worth some more conversation amongst the councillors who've been so very busy on purely COVID related stuff. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Ian?
Thanks, Chair. I mean, that was, and thanks, Judy, for that contribution. I think that's you made some interesting points. I remain reasonably kind of not relaxed, but comfortable that we do this. And I've certainly, following the overview and scrutiny meeting, did some further research and I think and I really obviously thank overview and scrutiny colleagues for what was a really good discussion I think they had the other week. And I've seen obviously what other councils are doing, and I do think there is an argument that says that this could raise some money both for for some of our causes and obviously for lots of number of our local organisations. But I've listened to Judy, and although whilst I would be, I think, happy to proceed, I'm more than happy also to perhaps to go along and second Judy's proposal that we do maybe take that little bit more time. I am concerned a bit, that where I think Steve said that about the minimum age thing, and I think I'd certainly like to have some further discussions around that, and indeed obviously the weekly spend stuff that came out at scrutiny. So I think I would be prepared to second if that Judy's proposal on that basis, that we do embark in some further cross-party discussions, and I think perhaps seek a wider view from councillors who maybe obviously haven't had the advantage of listening to Steve, his presentations, and Keith Hoskins in the past at the cabinet meetings, and so we can get input from a wider group of councillors in line with sort of the things that the overview and scrutiny was saying. So so I'm happy to, if I think Judy's formally proposing that, I'm happy to second that proposal, Chair.
Okay, lovely. Do we need to do some procedures?
I just wanted to clarify, Chair, if we're talking about an adjournment to the next cabinet meeting of this item, or if you're talking about an adjournment for a short period and a delegation to the relevant executive member with the service director to allow for those discussions to take place.
I think it should probably come back to cabinet.
I think there's something of this nature, especially given the stage that potentially we could bring it back at, and looking at the policies, it makes sense for cabinet to deal with it rather than via delegation, if the exec member is happy with that.
Yeah, Chair, I'm very much happy with that. Though the matter in front of us is just the policies, not the entire concept of a lottery. And I'm not sure if Councillor Billings suggesting reconsidering the entire concept of a lottery or just the policies. Just the policies. Well, I've got no problem with that.
Just simply, I think simply the policy. So the recommendation that we have, colleagues, is that Cabinet approves the implementation of the new policies associated with launching and delivering the North Herts Community Lottery. But Councillor Billing, I think, is proposing that that's changed to more along the lines of we're considering postponing that until the next Cabinet meeting, if to allow for appropriate consideration by Cabinet colleagues and members, indeed cross-party. Yep. Okay. So I'm assuming we need to vote on that, unless there's anyone else that wishes to speak on this issue first. No. So can we move to vote, please? Right, there we go. Surprising, isn't it? Right. So I think we're going to come back and review the policies, and then we'll discuss them at the next cabinet. Excellent. In that case, I'll revert back to the remaining items that fall under item 7, which are the referrals from other committees. I have a referral from Finance, Audit and Risk Committee held on the 23rd of June, which is the risk management update. I think, is Ian Cooper going to present that one?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So a fairly brief discussion at Finance, Audit and Risk Committee about this item, but they were happy to forward it on to you without any specific comments, but they did discuss the sort of risks in a bit more detail.
Okay. Do we have any questions from anyone on that report? No. Okay, and then also we have item 7C, which is referral from Finance, Audit and Risk Committee of the 23rd of June again on the revenue budget outturn, which I think I will be taking with item 11. And we'll have and we've also got the investment strategy end of year referral from Finance, Audit and Risk, which is going to be taken with item 12. So we'll move on to item 9, which is strategic planning matters. Can I ask councillors Clark and Collins to present on that, please?
Yeah, I can see the strange look on Councillor Collins' face. It's because he's got the strategic transport side, so I'll take the planning bit first. And Ian Falstone and Nigel Smith are both in attendance, so can take it. 3 recommendations in front of you for this. One of them talks about Appendix A, B and C. Appendix A is a response to Central Beds Council on developments they're having in their area, 4,000 houses around the Barton le Clay area, and our response to that. They do have some others that we're aware of up at Henlow and on the dog track. There's a number of houses. It does affect us because people, one, it would be nice for our businesses in Letchworth and Hitchin for the people to come down and engage. So that is welcome, but there's also the possibilities, the impact on our road network. As I've been pointed out by the transport portfolio holder, there's a straight run for dirty vehicles to come straight down there into Hitchin, where we have an air problem. So we do need to be mindful. Item B is to do with the Ashwell neighbourhood plan, and C is the Knebworth plan. There is also something in here that I know Councillor Albert will be concerned with, because there's some money going back from 2017, 2018 that was put aside for work within the local plan, and there is still work to do within the local plan on the master planning side, making it more acceptable in an environmental way. And we do have issues on that within the plan, because we do have staffing issues and funding issues. So that is what is being proposed with that, to be used within the local plan rather than the narrow one. Narrow thing that I will ask actually Nigel Smith if he would explain that and to cover any points I've missed before I hand over to Councillor Collins. So Nigel, you there?
I am, yes. Yeah, on the third recommendation, if you just wanted some further information on that, as it says in the recommendation, it's broadening the use of an existing planning reserve to include the delivery of the local plan. Previously, that reserve's been primarily put aside for dealing with planning matters outside the district. So we're also looking at using it for matters inside the district, which, as Councillor Clark says, includes the master planning work to deliver the large sites proposed in the local plan.
Yeah, thank you. And is there anything else I've missed in there?
No.
Right, thank you for that. That covers my report. If there's any questions on that, we can tie them up at the end, if that's okay with you, Councillor Collins.
Yeah, from me, I think from the transport side, you've got pretty much everything you need to see in the papers. I think the big concern I have in terms of Central Bedfordshire's development, both at Barton le Clay and also to the north as well, we really mustn't forget the impact those developments will have on traffic on our town centres, particularly in terms of Letchworth and Baldock, and as well as Hitchin. Hitchin already has 2 air quality monitoring areas. That's where air quality is illegally poor, and some of these developments feed directly into that. So the Barton le Clay development and the developments up to the north, Stondon and that area that are in the Central Bedfordshire plan, they will have a really adverse effect on our area in Hitchin, and they will have negative air quality monitoring impacts. And when we're looking at matters like Luton Airport expansion, which hasn't gone away, that's going to have a negative effect on that as well. And also we need to look in terms of our town centres. While it could be beneficial, more people living in the area brings more people into the town centres, there's nowhere for them to park, and we don't have adequate transport solutions for them in place. So these all need to be considered in the Cabinet's response to Central Bedfordshire, and also need to be considered in our own local plan and the work going on there. But I know we're doing that. I'm not entirely sure whether Central Bedfordshire is.
Okay, thank you very much both. Any questions, comments, etc. from colleagues? Councillor Mantle.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I really wanted to make it quite clear that when we talk about transport, we mean all forms of transport, including public transport, bicycles, pedestrians, invalid carriages, mobility scooters, etc. And I am not totally sure that Central Bedfordshire share our enthusiasm for these alternatives, and I think it would be useful to make the point to them that we are talking about people getting in from Central Bedfordshire into North Hertfordshire by means other than using cars. And also, if Herts County Council, in their wisdom, decide to take on the powers that they have to regulate bus services, this has to be done in conjunction with Central Bedfordshire, because, I mean, just to be very parochial, our local bus route runs into Stotfold. There is a route through Ickleford runs into Alsey. And I think it's very important that if the county council do decide to take on these new powers, that they exercise them in cooperation with Central Bedfordshire, which may well mean Central Bedfordshire also have to adopt the plans and perhaps change their thinking.
Excellent. I think those are valid points, well made, that all of us that are in conversation with county will take away and make sure are fed back into it. Paul.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, totally agree with my colleague. It is something, I mean, we have the demand responsive transport bus service to the west of the to the east of the district. Thank you. Yes, I'm looking at the map the other way. That's fine. We need to get something for north, south and beyond, you know, because people do want to go to Stevenage, St Albans, into Bedford, and, you know, or conversely coming to Hitchin, Letchworth, Royston and Baldock. So Mr. Fullstone, I believe, is on the meeting somewhere. Can I ask him to make a note of that and to feed it back to Daniel Washington, who's our transport officer, so that we can make sure we do it from them. And yes, I'm sure any county councillors that are here will follow that up as well.
He says, speaking as a county councillor himself. Right, colleagues, I will remind ourselves that we are noting the report on the strategic planning matters, and we're also noting the correspondence in appendices A and C, and then that we're being asked to extend the use of the reserve for the additional planning income in 2017 and 2018 to include delivery of the local plan. So any further comments in respect of the recommendations on this particular report, bearing in mind everything we've heard? No. Shall we move to the vote? Do we need to take each of those separately, Jeanette, or all together? So all together. There we go. Lovely. In which case, that's done. So let's move on to item 10, Baldock, Bygrave and Clothall Neighbourhood Plan, which is again Councillor Clark.
Switch my microphone back on. Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, this is to report back that the result of the referendum is noted, and to make Baldock, Bygrave and Clothall Neighbourhood Plan as part of the statutory development plan for North Hertfordshire. Any questions?
Sam.
Yeah, Chair, thank you. This is not directly relevant to this, but it's something to do with all planning matters going forwards regarding Baldock in particular, but also Clothall, or Clothall, as some people pronounce it, as I think it probably is pronounced. Something we need to be aware of is the scale of archaeology in that area. There is a substantial amount of archaeology that's likely to be turned up in any development in Baldock. And I think all planning matters going forwards in that area, we need to be aware of that and perhaps work with developers in order to get some funding in order to properly understand the archaeology of that area of North Hertfordshire, because it is probably quite a lot more significant than people previously have understood. And I think we need to be looking at that going forwards, while on these plans, it's not specifically relevant.
Do you have a recommendation in there, or is that just a point for us to note generally?
I think it's a point to note for generally, unless somebody can come up with a specific recommendation on these neighbourhood plans. I don't think it directly impacts the neighbourhood plans.
I don't suggest coming up with a recommendation on something so specific tonight,
I agree.
but if colleagues wish to deal with that offline, I'd be happy for them to do so. Paul.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just asking Mr. Falstone to use his pencil again and mark down to note for Mr. Allington, who's our strategic sites officer and is dealing with the Baldock site with his team, to make note of that and, you know, to take that into consideration as we go forward with the plan. I think that's all we have to do for that one.
Yep. Okay, lovely. And any further questions or comments on this item? I see no hands or faces looking at me, wanting to say things. Obviously see faces. In which case, the recommendations are that the result of the referendum for the Baldock, Bygrave and Clothall neighbourhood plan is noted, and to make the Baldock, Bygrave and Clothall Common plan as part of the statutory development plan for North Hertfordshire. So taking both of those items together, please. Right, I think that is very clearly and unanimously carried again. So I shall move then to item 11, the revenue budget outturn, and ask Councillor Albert for his report.
Thanks, Chair. The reports in front of you, and I'm going to try and be reasonably brief this evening. You'll be pleased to know, Chair. As detailed in the summary on page 97 in front of you on that report, and I will be just really referring to the report in the main agenda. There is obviously the referrals from the Finance Committee, but I mean, perhaps Mr. Cooper might sort of separately just formally cover off the referrals from Finance, but the Finance Committee were happy to recommend these various noting and recommendations to Cabinet. The final quarter saw a significant reduction in our forecast spend. The most significant element of this was the decrease in the support required by Stevenage Leisure due to partly reducing utility costs, such as reducing the pool temperatures and the use of furlough. All the other significant variances are detailed in Table 2, starting on page 99. It should be noted that 317,000 of the forecast movement are areas of spend that are now planned to be delivered in this financial year 2021-22, and we're asked to approve these budget carry forwards. In relation to the parking income position at the bottom of page 104, there are a couple of typos. The total at the bottom in bold for the working budget should be 1.338, and the equivalent number for the outturn should be 1,278. 1,278,000. The variance, though, is correct, and all the other numbers in the table are correct. Table 6 on page 110 details the year-end budget impact of COVID-19. The final sales fees and charges contribution from government has yet to be formally confirmed, but assuming there are no issues with our claim, then the net impact is 1.5 million additional costs to this council, and that's in line and indeed with many other councils across the country. And I think there's something, and I think Councillor Collins touched upon this in relation to the lottery earlier on. These are the direct impacts to this council of the government not fulfilling its promise to actually fully fund local authorities for all the work they do, and that has an impact long term on our reserves, albeit that we've not had to have any kind of emergency budget. We've been able to stick and keep within our general fund reserves, but nevertheless there is that long term impact. Table 7 on page 100M shows that impact on the general fund, which is a balance at the start of the year of just under 9.4 million and a year-end position subject to audit of almost 8.9 million. This is just under a 500,000 reduction. So the difference between this and the COVID-19 impact is made up by other variances that weren't due to COVID-19, carry forwards of 719,000, which will increase spend and therefore decrease the general fund balance in 21-22, and finally the position in relation to sources of funding, which is explained on pages 107 to 109. And the final two things I'd like to point out are the transfers to and from reserves on page 112 and 113. These will be referred on, Chair, to full council for approval. And then the COVID-19 financial support that we paid out as detailed in table 10, the business grants, and that time of writing is totaled over 46 million and remains increasing. We've come up in this year with a range and working with cabinet colleagues like obviously Councillor North, Councillor Hoskins and former Councillor Helen Oliver and an excellent team in Joe Duffus's area. We've come up with a number of innovative schemes, including just recently some further payments to pubs, the travel industry and so on. And I think it's a really great effort and some fantastic work by our officers, and has been much appreciated by local businesses. And we hope to get a further £1.2 million from government, which we will look to make further business support and business support fund payments later in the year as necessary. So, Chair, I'm happy to move the report and the recommendations that are set out on page 97 and 98.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Councillor Albert? No. In that case,
and I don't know whether Mr. Cooper probably just wants to formally confirm that Finance Committee were happy with that. I mean, I can, but perhaps he will as well.
Yes, if Mr. Cooper's there.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Albert. Yes, good discussion at Finance Audit and Risk Committee. There were some questions, one of which was the question around the car parking income numbers, which the committee spotted. So thank you to them for that. And also highlighted the income guarantee from central government, whilst the guarantee only covers 75% of income losses above the first 5%. And there was the two main comments coming out of Finance Audit and Risk Committee, and they're happy to refer it on to you.
All right. Thank you very much. So, colleagues, are we satisfied with the reports, and shall we move to voting on the recommendations on this referral? Yeah. Okay, and we'll take all of those items together then. There we go. Lovely, and that is carried. And I've also got the recommendations in the report from Councillor Albert as well, which are largely the same. Do we want to have a second vote on that as well? On this page, Jeanette, I've got the recommendations from FARC, and then the report is exactly the same. What would my question be to Ian Cooper? Just go. Mr. Cooper, the recommendations in the referral from FARC are essentially exactly the same as the recommendations in the report presented by Councillor Albert. Do you want us to vote separately on the report as well, just to confirm everything, or are you happy to take the initial vote as covering it all?
The vote should be just on what's on the Cabinet report. The recommendations from FARC just for you to, they're happy with the report, so nothing for them to just vote on.
Excellent. That's fine then. In which case, let's move on to item 12, investment strategy, which is also a referral from FAR. Do you want Ian to present? Well, there's two Ians, isn't there? Do we want the officer Ian to present first, or the councillor Ian to present first, to save me repeating the same mistakes I made on the last item?
If Mr. Cooper would like to just give his recommendations on what the FAR discussion, then I'll move the Cabinet report on page 117.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. So another discussion at FAR when they met last week, and they were happy with the report. There were a couple of questions around the level of outstanding PWLB loans and also the coverage of the investment strategy. But apart from that, they were very happy with the report and referred it on to you. So yeah, just this report in front of you to consider and vote on.
Okay, lovely. And I've got 4 recommendations from Finance Audit and Risk, and those are the expenditure of 1.883 million in 2020-2021 on the capital programme, and in particular changes detailed in Table 3, which resulted in a net increase on working estimates of 0.001 million, be noted, that the adjustments to the capital programme for 2020-21 as a result of the revised timetable of schemes detailed in Table 2, increasing the estimated spend in 2021-22 by 0.522 million, or 0.527 million reprofited from 2020-21 and the 0.005 million from 21-22 reprofited in 2020-21 be approved. That the position of the availability of capital resources as detailed in Table 4, paragraph 8.8, and the requirement to keep the capital programme under review for affordability be noted. And then 4, that the application of £1.224 million of capital receipts towards the 2020-2021 capital programme and the drawdown of 0.417 million from set aside receipts in paragraph 8.8 be approved. Oh, there's a 5th one that's snuck in on the same line as well, excuse me. The position of Treasury management activity as set at the end of March 2021 be noted. And that's all of the referrals. No, Councillor Billing, I cannot repeat all of that. Are we happy to note what FAR has asked us to note, colleagues? Agreed. Everybody's agreed. Do we need to push buttons? No. Would you like us to push the buttons?
But you need to also recommend council the others.
We do also need to recommend to council the others.
I haven't moved the report yet, so
Yeah, exactly.
So-
So I was dealing with the referral first, colleagues. So I think we're all agreed on the referral, but let's let Ian have his moment on his report briefly, please.
Of course, I'm always brevity is my middle name. Right? But there you go. You see, people are clearly agreeing with that. Thanks, Chair, for asking me to be brief, and I will indeed be so. Position on capital is summarised by the table of page 120. The intention at this time last year was that we would spend 13.4 million this year. The outturn position actually is we've only spent £2 million. The majority of that impact is the ideas that we've had to invest in commercial and residential property for the benefit of the district have been hampered mainly by COVID-19, but also impacted by the changes in investment rules from the Public Works Loans Board and SIPFA. The lower than forecast spend means that we have funded all our capital spend from contributions and capital reserves. We've added over 700,000 to capital reserves during the year from finalising sales on surplus land and buildings. There are further sales in the pipeline which will support our planned capital investments while minimising the need to borrow. Position on Treasury is summarised in paragraphs 8.11 through to 8.20 with more detail in Appendix B. The rates of return have been drastically impacted by COVID-19, with the average rate now on new deals of just 0.17%. And there's little prospect that these rates will increase back up very quickly. And as detailed in paragraph 8.20, we are progressing with our new long-term investments in a property fund and multi-asset fund. These will help diversify our portfolio of investments, and it's hoped to provide a yield in line with the longer-term investment risk being taken. And this is being supported by our Treasury advisors. The end of year investment strategy is referred on to council as detailed in recommendation 2.6. So Chair, happy to go to not to read out, but to just to note that those recommendations in 2.1 and 2.6 and asking Cabinet to agree those and refer on the recommendation 2.6.
I think that's an excellent idea. Does anyone have any questions or comments on this? No, lovely. In that case, shall we vote? Well, we're going to vote on the recommendations in that report, please. There we go. And that is noted. Next item, item 13, risk management quarterly update and annual report, to be presented in brief by Councillor Albert.
Thank you. I'll do the press a button and just get to the right page, Chair. So yeah, so the two risks that are in front of you have been considered by the risk management group as this quarter as detailed in recommendation 2.1. The proposal is that the cyber risk remains unchanged and the risk score for the Brexit EU transition risk is reduced to a 5 for the reasons detailed in paragraph 8.3 and appendix B. The end of year risk report in front of you also includes an annual report on risk attached at Appendix C, page 159, and this provides a summary of the risk activity throughout the year. And you asked to refer this on to council so they can note the activity that's happened in the very strange and unusual year that we've just faced. And maybe probably similarly to this, Mr. Cooper might just want to confirm the discussion that took place at FAR on this.
Yes, please, Ian, if you could come in and sort of give us the recommendations from FAR.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I can confirm that FAR discussed the report and we're happy with all the recommendations made, so they're exactly in line with the Cabinet recommendations.
Okay, all right. Questions, comments? Councillor Collins.
Thanks, Chair. Just to make a point on the Brexit risks, I mean, there'd be some people maybe some consternation that the Brexit risk has gone down to medium likelihood and medium impact. That's the current situation. It doesn't mean that risk can't go back up or it can't go down. So I think it's really, very important to underline that point, that there are still some very clear impacts that could have on this council, and it is the effect on this council as well as the wider district that we represent, but also that the risk could go back up as well as going back down. I think that's quite important to underline.
Yep, I think we're aware of that across the board, aren't we, colleagues? Okay, any further questions, comments on this item? No, in that case, can we move to the vote on the recommendations in that report? There we go. And that one is carried as well. Okay, right. This next item is going to require a little bit of technical faffing around. We are being asked to consider something which needs to be looked at confidentially at first instance. So I would propose that under section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972, the press and public be excluded from the meeting on the grounds that the following report will involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of part 1 of schedule 12A of the said act as amended. Please may I have a seconder?
Happy to second, Madam Chairman.
Lovely. And we need to vote to take ourselves into part 2, please, colleagues. Well done. Okay, right. So what's going to happen now is slightly different and more time consuming than what would happen in normal times, or even indeed when we were allowed to do things completely remotely. Our IT support are going to move the officers and the stream to this chamber to a breakout room so that the meeting can continue. A holding message will be displayed on the YouTube channel. Please give us a few moments to ensure that this has happened. Colleagues, if you could remain patient while So I think, Matthew, are we back?
You are back live.
Thank you. In that case, thank you everyone for your patience while we were considering the part 2 items. I think, do we need to do a roll call of the officers who are still with us?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Ian Cooper.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you, Ian Fullstone.
Present.
Thank you, Vaughan Watson.
Present.
Thank you, and Andrew Mills.
Present.
Thank you, Chair.
Lovely. Thank you very much. In which case, can I ask for Councillor Jarvis to present his report on the grounds maintenance contract review?
Thank you very much. So this is a report of a review into the grounds maintenance contract, where we considered whether or not we should extend the existing contract or whether or not we should terminate it as a break opportunity next year, and whether or not we could make changes to the contract that would both support some of the environmental improvements we want to make and reduce the costs. And we identified a series of changes that we could make to the contract, which are set out in 8.3, which both support our environmental objectives and will save a not insignificant amount of money. They include some changes to the regime for grass cutting, particularly on the highways, and reflect the changed view about the way in which grass should be cut, with many more people supporting it being cut longer. I'm sorry, you can't cut grass longer, can you? Being left longer before it's cut. There are also some changes in the way in which Howard Park and Gardens have been managed, and there are some potential longer term changes in the structure of the council's green space team, looking at how we get them more aligned to the biodiversity agenda and some of the green space implications of the local plan. So the changes are set out, proposed changes set out in 8.3, and the recommendations set out in 2.1.
Okay, thank you very much, Steve. Do we have anything further to add on that from either Andrew Mills or Vaughan Watson?
No, Chair, not from me. Vaughan Watson.
And nothing from me. Thank you very much.
Okay, lovely. Questions, queries from colleagues? Councillor Albert.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very happy to support this report. Probably perhaps some advice either from officers or Councillor Jarvis, because I think we have managed to obtain somewhat of a virtuous circle of actually looking to achieving some savings, but whilst actually implementing our priorities and the things that we wanted to do in relation to our environmental and climate change agenda. So I mean, probably the advice there is hope that we can make sure that we can communicate that widely when we're able to at a suitable moment to go public with when we've signed off the contract, because I think this is a real achievement to actually do both those things, make that saving and also achieving our various environmental objectives.
Lovely. Do you want to come back on that? Happy with everything?
Yes, I agree that it's good we've been able to make those changes. I think there's clearly an important communications piece of work to be done. In particular, we need to make it clear where there are areas of grass where the maintenance is going to be visibly different, in that that's intentional. It isn't that they've been forgotten, and the reasons for doing that. I think it's also important that we make clear that some of the other changes will produce carbon savings as well. And I hope that we can capture those in a carbon savings plan that we're going to be putting together soon. So I think from that point of view, there's good news all round, whilst essentially delivering the same or better service to the public and saving some money.
Okay. Lovely. I'll take Gary and then Ian Mantle.
Thank you, Chair. It's just really a couple of comments on the scheme, and one of them was around the actual on the number of cuts, and Councillor Jarvis is absolutely right. It was raised, and it has still been raised by some residents in Letchworth, and I know it's probably a bit of a sensitive, more sensitive issue in Letchworth than some towns, because just of the amount of grass that we seem to have in the world's first garden city, of course, and the number of trees. But most of it, I think, it was just a bit unfortunate that and the communication part will be key, as mentioned by Councillor Jarvis, that in announcing the initiative, the Walden initiative, if you like, and encouraging those areas of growth, it coincided with a bit of a lapse in the service where we're talking about the grass verge outside of people's homes in residential roads was left for a period longer than it would have done under normal circumstances. And I think people just got a little bit confused about what the council's intentions were. But one thing I would ask Councillor Jarvis and the officers is that I did receive some criticism this week about the good efforts made in one area of the town where we've gone to the trouble of planting new trees in residential roads, but there don't appear to be any maintenance of those trees. And the resident that spoke to me, what they pointed out is that actually those trees aren't being encouraged to grow. What they're actually doing is just bushing up and growing out. And there were some interesting examples on social media of photographs where people were sort of complaining about the council's lack of cutting, but then showing you trees that are bushed out completely across pathways. So there's probably an issue around existing trees and the maintenance of those, and new trees that haven't been encouraged to grow, but all the moisture is being sacked into the bushes that are growing around the bottom of them and are just expanding outwards rather than upwards. So I'll just make the plea to officers to have a look at maybe that and maybe how we can improve that service so we can encourage the trees in our roads to grow properly.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
No, I think that's a valid point, and Steve can take that away and deal with that offline.
Yeah, I think there's some real points there. I mean, I think that the first point that Gary makes, the communication of these things is very important. There were some particular issues this year in that there was a very dry spell and then a very warm and wet spell. And I think there was some criticism that the grass had been cut too short in the dry spell and then left too long in the wet spell. And I think that there clearly been some problems there. I think one of the things one has to remember is that the weather varies quite a lot from year to year, and that causes some issues. I'm aware that there are some complications around the management of street trees, and I don't know whether or not Andrew Mills wants to say anything about that, because there are occasions, there are limits in terms of what the district council's agreement with the county council covers. So there may be some issues around that area, but I don't know if Andrew Mills wants to come in and say something further about that.
I don't know if I want to bring Andrew in on this because it's not necessarily directly relevant to the report, but I think if Gary wants to have a conversation, which I think he does with you and Andrew at some point around those specific locations, yeah, that'd be helpful if we could do that then. Lovely. Councillor Mantle.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I have 2 points. One is item 3.1, I couldn't actually understand the last sentence of a welcome and explanation as to what it's supposed to mean and what the consequences of it are if it's anything like what I think it might mean. And shall I go on to my second point?
Yep.
While people are looking at that.
Yep, carry on.
I just wanted to alert to under 2.1, there have been all sorts of issues in the Howard Park and Gardens, particularly Howard Park. And I'm concerned that any change we make to the supervision management of it be thought through and, more importantly, communicated properly and effectively to the people around there who have been, shall we say, inconvenienced by some of the things that have been going on which shouldn't have been, which I suspect is not going to be affected by this, but I think it's important when this becomes public knowledge that we make it very clear what the changes are and how it's not going to adversely impact the effect.
Thank you. I think we'll note the second point, and we hear what you're saying on that. In respect of the clarity of the report, do colleagues generally understand what's in paragraph 3.1, or do we need it expanding upon? I'm satisfied that I understand it, and I'm happy to move us towards the recommendations unless there's any further points for discussion and debate. No? Okay, lovely. So in that case, can we take the recommendations on this part of the report, please? All right, and that is carried. And that was the final item of business that I have on this agenda. Thank you very much for your time this evening. Those of you that are physically present, those of you that are with us on the internet and via the Zoom and everything else. It's very strange not having everybody all in the same room, and it's very strange not having us all on a Zoom call together. It's a difficult way of running a meeting, but I think you've all handled it very well. Thank you and good night. Can we take the stream down, please, Matthew?